Want a quick 10-minute wrap-up of the week's compliance news? Well, this is the podcast for you, 10 for 10, where Tom Fox, the voice of compliance, wraps up 10 top compliance stories which occurred over the past week. If you don't know, Tom has a daily news podcast, appropriately called the Daily Compliance News, and 10 for 10 wraps up the week. So get up on a Saturday morning, have a great cup of coffee, and check out 10 for 10, the podcast which gives you the week's top compliance news. Are you interested in upping your game in compliance through the use of AI and machine learning technology? Well, check out my latest book, Upping Your Game, How Compliance and Risk Management Move to 2030 and Beyond. You can check it out in the show notes. I've got a link to the purchase at Amazon.com. Upping Your Game. 10 for 10 for the week ending August 23, 2025. Our first story comes to us from WADA. Yes, the World Anti-Doping Agency had a press release that it has confirmed non-compliance of the National Anti-Doping Organization of Sri Lanka. Is this punching below your weight? Sure looks like it. You might think WADA would have more important things to do, like look at Russia or other well-known recidivist cheaters. But no, they're going after Sri Lanka just in time for the 2026 Olympics. Next up from CXToday. Do you consider audio quality a compliance risk? Well, this article suggests you might want to do so, because poor audio quality does not simply frustrate customers, it undermines the very process that regulated industries rely on. Call recordings, which are essential for proving disclosures, capturing consent, and resolving disputes, are only as good as the clarity of the conversation. So think about audio quality as a compliance issue. Next up from Cargo Facts. What are the costs of and challenges for compliance in the cargo industry? Well, aviation's role in the global compliance change is under more sharper scrutiny than ever. In 2023 alone, the sector was responsible for 2.5 of global CO2 emissions, enough to put it in the top 10 emitters if it were a country. So there are lots of compliance issues around. And then when you throw in, of course, trade tariffs and sanctions, it gets even more so. Next up from the New York Times. Mayor Adams' associates and supporters are said to face corruption charges, all the way from cash in bags at hamburger joints to other nefarious conduct. Yes, Eric Adams is back in the news, this time for his associates who may be under federal scrutiny and perhaps even under indictment, as several associates and supporters of the mayor are expected to face corruption charges in the coming days. Of course, the mayor was dropped by the Trump administration so they could extort his cooperation in their immigration tactics, but apparently he didn't cut out or reserve any savings for those who were doing the dirty deeds for him. Next up from Bloomberg. Citibank is investigating HR complaints against wealth head Andy Sieg, who was brought on by the current chief executive, Jane Fraser, as a high-profile hire to drive a key part of Citi's turnaround. In his quest to shake up Citi's wealth business, he's drawn complaints from current and former staff accusing him of intimidating and unfairly sidelining employees since he's arrived. So he sits on the bank's executive committee, and he's obviously a very powerful person, but it appears that he's at least been charged or accused of harassment and basically very, very bad behavior. So it's going to be interesting to see what Citi's internal investigation comes up with. They've hired the law firm of Paul Weiss to handle it. Next up, the first of a couple of articles from Reuters. In this first article, it reports that CVS must pay a $290 million fine in a whistleblower drug cheating case. A federal judge ordered the drug maker, or drug seller rather, to pay nearly that amount for overcharging it for Medicare, prescription, and drugs. The federal court tripled the award based upon the damages assessed at trial. Our second Reuters story comes to us about Elon Musk, who has claimed a advice of counsel defense in a Twitter lawsuit, but he won't give any information about what that advice was. So can you have a shield without a sword, or can you just do the Elon Musk, say it's my way or the highway in federal court? Well, we're about to find out. Next up, from the Financial Times, Brooke Masters, in an opinion column, says the boss is back. Probably no surprise that bosses have made a huge return in the corporate world and are stamping their feet, saying that employees are going to have to toe the line, as Brooke reports in her piece that no more Mr. Nice Guy. 5 years after the COVID pandemic forced employers to embrace empathy and flexibility, bosses are laying down the line. JP Morgan's Jamie Dimon blasted remote workers, and Google's co-founder Sergey Brin said that 60 hours a week is the sweet spot of productivity. My favorite, of course, is AT&T boss John Stankey, who said we're going to move away from loyalty, tenure, and conformity to a market-based culture, rewarding capability, contribution, and commitment. Whether bribery and corruption is in that package, of course, that remains to be seen, but that seems to be what always happens when you tell people the only metric they're going to be measured on is how much sales they have. All right, now a question. Which state has the most corruption? Illinois? Well, for my money, it's Louisiana. And the current mayor joins a long line of Louisiana politicians accused of corruption. $100 bills stashed in a freezer, riverboat casino licenses sold to the highest bidder, truckloads of granite traded in a quid pro quo. The colorful history of corrupt politicians goes back at least to Huey Long, but now we have the mayor, LaToya Cantrell, and her lover accused of bribery and corruption, and are now been charged with this. So whether you think it's Illinois or perhaps Louisiana, we've got yet another set of Louisiana politicians accused of corruption. And our final story comes to us from Africa News, and it reports that Senegal's president, whose name I'm not even going to try to pronounce, campaigned on a platform to return financial accountability to the government after his predecessor allegedly stole billions. Well, he has done that with the passage of a new law, but guess what? He exempted himself from the new law. Gee, how convenient. So the Senegalese president, who passed a lengthy piece of legislation around anti-bribery and anti-corruption, has exempted himself from the law. With the new law, prosecutors, judges, and authorities will have to declare their assets at the beginning and the end of their tenure. But once again, the president doesn't have to. Now, will he pull President Trump and simply take everything out of the White House? At this point, it's unclear, but if you don't have to declare, it certainly is not very transparent going forward. I hope you have a great weekend. I hope you'll join us next weekend for our next episode of 10 for 10 on the Compliance Podcast Network. If you haven't done so this month, check out Adventures in Compliance, where we are exploring the Valley of Fear. Timothy and Fiona are in the midst of a 5-part series exploring the last Sherlock Holmes novel for this podcast series. This is Tom Fox again. 10 for 10 is a special production of the Compliance Podcast Network. I'd also urge you to check out the Daily Compliance News, which posts every week from Monday to Friday, where I give 4 curated stories of bribery, corruption, and compliance events that will allow you to help you start your day as well. So check out the Daily Compliance News and subscribe or rate and review to both 10 for 10 and the Daily Compliance News. Thanks so much for listening to this episode of 10 for 10. I hope you'll check out the newest podcast in the Compliance Podcast Network, the Compliance Tip of the Day. In Compliance Tip of the Day, I give a 5 to 8 minute summary of one tip that you can integrate into your compliance program or put together for greater compliance program efficiency. Finally, if you're a Sherlock Holmes fan, I am preparing a new season of Adventures in Compliance where I go through the 4 novels of Sherlock Holmes. Hear it on the Compliance Podcast Network.